Hello and welcome to our living room.
Yay, a change of scenery.
We switched up locations on you. I am sitting here with my wife, your therapist, and today we're going to be talking about raising neurodivergent children.
Yep, from kiddos up to teenagers.
As always, my name is Price, and I married your therapist.
I'm Ash, and I'm your therapist. Please keep in mind that even though this is a podcast about mental health and therapy, it's not the same thing as or a replacement for therapy.
We have another riveting plot twist for you today, beyond just the fact that we're not sitting in our kitchen like usual.
Dun dun dun.
We travel to Wilmington, which is on the coast of North Carolina, about 3 hours away from where we live, to meet up with, if you've been listening to the podcast, a familiar face, Courtney Clement Bowles.
Yeah, Courtney is a play therapist, and she works specifically with neurodivergent kiddos and their parents.
We had a really great time getting to know her in person with her wonderful husband, Philip.
Mm-hmm.
They were very kind to us. They took us to the beach, and they took us to some restaurants in Wilmington. We had an amazing time.
Yeah.
Courtney's the best, but she's not just an amazing, I guess we could say friend now, but she's she's like at the top of her game when it comes to play therapy. And it's really a delight to get to talk to her about how to work with neurodivergent kids.
Yeah, we found out while we were there that she's been recently appointed to the play therapy board. So not only does she work as a play therapist, but she's getting to really influence the field. It's incredible.
I keep thinking about like a boardroom with like people in suits and they're just all on the floor with like trucks and trains and blocks.
So do you prefer this truck or this truck?
And as the chair of the board, I would like the red truck. Courtney stole the red truck. I would like. No, I'm joking. Obviously, I have nothing but respect for Courtney and what she does. What she's bringing to the table in this conversation, what was so exciting about the fact that you got to interview her, was a conversation with somebody who is an expert on neurodivergent kids, but also an expert on raising and parenting neurodivergent kids. Yeah. Courtney offers therapy and kind of coaching, if you will, to parents of neurodivergent children. So she's not only working with the children directly, but she's working with parents to help them build a more meaningful connection and bond with their, autistic or ADHD or otherwise neurodivergent
OCD
kiddo.
Yep.
Yeah. So she's got some really valuable insights in a world where children with these conditions are usually told that they're broken and that they need to be healed or fixed.
And their parents specifically are told basically like this is a curse on your household. Like this is a horrible thing.
But Courtney is an expert in the field of saying, no, we love this. We love what makes your child unique, and we're going to learn how to work with your child because it's not super intuitive. Neurodivergent kids are not accommodated for in a lot of ways, and so if you're learning how to be a parent, if you're learning how to work with these children, the normal books, parenting books, aren't going to be super applicable, and that's where Courtney comes in.
Right. It's already hard enough, but if you're parenting a neurodivergent kiddo or maybe suspecting that your kid is neurodivergent, there's just so much more out there that's going to be a challenge, not to mention there's so many fewer resources for those folks. So this was very exciting to get to kind of add in as part of that conversation. I certainly learned a lot. You and I had some good questions going in about things we wondered about and things I've seen that I wondered, what could have been different for this client. It was really amazing.
And the two of you just took off in this interaction as well.
So much so that it's a 2-part episode.
Yeah, this is going to be part 1.
Yep.
And then we're just cutting the episode in the middle, and part 2 will come out next week. So before we jump over to that, I wanted to level set, as I always do, the term dysregulated.
Yeah.
It's a term that we've used before on the podcast, but it's really heavily leaned on between the two of you.
It's a term we use a lot, and we just dive right in.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure that if anybody's coming into this and they're not super familiar with like what regulated versus dysregulated means, could you give us just a brief explanation so that they are going to hit the ground running with this?
So your nervous system runs all throughout your body. It attaches to every single part of your life. And if you think of it as like a seesaw, it can balance or it can kind of move either direction.
A seesaw, seashells by the seashore.
Yes.
That I know I didn't get that 100%, but I had a little bit of a lisp growing up, so that was an accomplishment for
Yeah,
me.
you crushed it.
Thank you.
Very nice.
Okay, please
So
continue.
that was it. Okay, so your nervous system, if you think of it as like a seesaw or a scale that can kind of move either direction, you can move one direction and be really overstimulated. Um,
Baby, you light up my world like nobody else. You said One Direction.
I was like, what does that have to do with being
One Direction.
overstimulated?
All
Okay,
right,
let's
I'm
get
gonna
through
shut
this.
the
We
fuck up.
got this.
You can just talk. Sorry.
Okay. You can actually move either way based on being overwhelmed, but you might go into being irritable and agitated or ready to like fight and argue or wanting to run away, kind of having too much energy, and that's that sort of anxious, irritable energy. Or you can go the other way where you're overwhelmed or overstimulated and you can go into kind of a shutdown. You can be like low and slow or apathetic. But if you are somewhere in that middle area, you're regulated or you have that equilibrium in your nervous system. And neurodivergent folks tend to be chronically dysregulated, but I think a lot of folks can be dysregulated. If you deal with anxiety or depression, you're probably going in and out of those different states or getting stuck in one. There's nothing bad about them. Your body is meant to go into those states. It really helps to protect you and take good care of you, but staying stuck in them is not a fun time. And so we talk a lot about dysregulated folks and trying to regulate.
Okay, great. I think that that would definitely help anybody jumping in.
Okay,
So
perfect.
let's cut over to that. Anything else you want to say before we do?
No, I can't wait for everybody to hear this episode. It was so fun to talk about. Oh, and I do want to include, even if you're not a parent to neurodivergent kiddos, even if, or don't ever think you will be a parent, that's fine. Um, this was a really healing episode just to get to listen to. I think getting to participate in these conversations and listening to them has been so good for me in understanding how I was impacted growing up. And I think that if you're in the same spot, you're just an adult dealing with a dysregulated nervous system or being neurodivergent, this is still a good episode for you. And you might, yeah, learn some helpful things.
Cool. Let's jump over.
Okay, so yeah. I don't know which episode it was, but at some point we threatened that we would come down and visit Courtney in her home, and now here we are in Wilmington.
They found
Getting to see
me.
Courtney. We're so glad to get to be here. And today we're going to be talking about parenting neurodivergent kiddos and some other related things, co-regulation. So I'm so excited to be here with you. Thanks for joining us.
I'm very excited to be here and so glad that we got to meet in person.
Yeah, this is lovely. Okay, so I think the first thing that we're talking about is just parenting neurodivergent kiddos kind of at like a high level. I don't work with kids. I get to see kids, neurodivergent folks, after they've been in a home that probably wasn't very affirming to them. But you're getting to come in at this really beautiful point and like intercede on their behalf, which I love. So tell me, what are some of the like common things that you're dealing with neurodivergent kiddos? How are you talking to their parents about how to be good, affirming parents to their kiddos?
Yeah, so it's tricky because first off, you have a kid who is oftentimes dysregulated because
Yeah.
they're in a world that is not really designed for them.
Yeah,
right?
I've been referring to it recently as like just chronically dysregulated. That's
Yes.
just kind of the natural state of being.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And then parenting that is hard.
Yeah, parenting is hard enough.
Yeah, it's hard enough. And then parenting, a child who is chronically dysregulated,
Yep.
right? That brings about so many more challenges.
Yeah.
And
Well, I even think to kind of shed light on how a lot of parents view this and why I think it's so important to get to have an affirming perspective and affirming counselors who can help like coach you through that. Big autism organizations like Autism Speaks, that obviously isn't accepted by like the autism community itself, they talk about curing it like curing cancer. Like there's this horrible curse on our house and we've got to get rid of it. But it's like, it's not a curse, but it is dysregulation and it is tough. So yeah, where are you coming in?
Yeah, well, I think it's, yes, getting the diagnosis, and then there are organizations that are not affirming.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of information coming at parents at once.
Oh, that's so true.
So first off, like out the gate, you're overwhelmed as a parent. Like, I mean, you've been overwhelmed, right? Because you have a child who you're probably thinking, like something's not adding up.
Something's going on. Even in the kids I know now who are adults who got diagnosed as adults, they're like, their parents were having them tested for things. Nothing ever like came about, especially because of how bad testing can be. But like their parents were like, something is going on. Something's wrong with my kid. There's something different about my kid from other kids.
Yeah, and then sometimes those parents have parenting advice from maybe friends, family members
Yeah.
that's like, just be more firm. You
Right.
know, you need to just lay down the law.
Yeah.
It's because I said so. You don't need to give reasons.
Yeah.
And so now you're just dysregulating a dysregulated
Right.
like person already,
right. Like
right?
adding chaos to chaos is just not a good mix.
Yeah, and the parent is probably feeling so lost, right? This isn't working. Why isn't it working? What's wrong with me? What's wrong with my kid? And so everyone is coming in like baseline, not feeling so great.
Yeah.
Not feeling hot.
So are people relieved to find you to like try something different? Are they tending to come in worn out and exhausted, or like hopeful for what's to come? Where are you kind of meeting families when that's going on? It sounds very frustrating to be there.
Yeah, and I honestly see both. I love the parents that contact me and they know about play therapy.
Yeah.
That gets me so excited.
Uh-huh.
They're like, we've tried other therapies, but I read about play therapy and this is what I want to do. This is what I like. They're feeling good about it.
I love that.
At some point, we may even talk about like child parent relationship therapy that might come up, CPRT, which is also something I'm trained in.
Oh, okay.
But there are other parenting like interventions that don't feel as like neurodivergent affirming.
Yeah.
And I think baseline like play therapy, CPRT is.
Tell me about CPRT a little bit. I don't know anything about that.
Okay, so CPRT is basically taking the clinical skills, like the therapist skills in the playroom, and teaching parents how to do it a little bit at home.
Oh, I like that so much.
And it includes a special playtime that's 30 minutes, one time a week.
I like that. That's so accessible. That's so much more accessible than like 2 hours with your child every day doing this technique to try to, change behaviors or whatever.
Yeah, and we want to see parents connecting with their children every day, but I think that having like that 30 minutes once a week that you can commit to, we make it special in the group. Like you give an invitation to the child.
Oh my gosh.
Like, it's this special.
I would have been so tickled as a kid to like get an invitation to something like that. That sounds amazing.
Yeah. And really what we see is like when you're able to connect in that 30 minutes, you're going to find more moments of connection or what some people in play therapy we call moments of meeting.
Okay. Oh,
You're going to find more of those moments throughout the week anyway. Yeah. So, yes, you have this 30-minute time where you're doing this special playtime, but then that does tend to bleed into like outside of special playtime.
Can I ask you a little bit more about this special playtime? Like what's happening? Are they engaging with specific toys for that? Or is it anything that's just creative? What's going on?
Yes. Play therapy, we have very specific toys that we use because we see them as tools. Like toys are not just like, to entertain the child, but like these are tools that the child can use to express themselves. So we have different categories of like emotional expression, aggressive release, and nurturing toys. And so what will happen is like the parent comes in and does like the lessons with me.
Yeah.
And then they create this like toolbox, of things, this toy box. And they're just special playtime toys. And I will tell parents, like, you can go to Walmart, dollar store, like, you don't need to go big on these things.
So they're not coming out at other times. They're just reserved for this time. Oh, that makes sense.
Okay. And then what the parent does is utilize play therapy skills of the be with attitudes, the tracking tracking the movements of the child. So, you decided to put that cup there, or, you're doing that.
And that's called tracking. Okay. I like that.
Yes. reflecting,
Mm-hmm.
maybe their feelings, oh, that was really surprising.
Yeah.
That surprised you. You're feeling so surprised. And
Uh-huh.
so doing those things, we also use facilitating decision making.
Yeah.
You decided to do that. Or if a child says,
Ooh.
um, which one do you want to choose? You can
Mm-hmm.
say, oh, in our special playtime, you get to decide.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
So,
really emphasizing that like decision making, which is so related to that sense of like having power and control in your own environment, which is so good.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. So that's CPRT, and it's really focused on, I mean, I think you can tell by the name, it's focused on the relationship. We need to
Mm-hmm.
have that connection.
Yeah.
We need to have that attunement between parent and child,
Mm-hmm.
to make strides in like behavior,
Yeah.
because the bottom line, like, we need connection.
Yeah, everything is about how are you getting connection or how are you perceiving that you're not getting connection and you desperately need it. But it all comes down to that for sure. That's every conversation I'm having. I'm keeping in the back of my mind that like somehow this is related to needing to connect with somebody.
Yeah. Now, I will say CPRT is like a big time commitment. When
Okay.
parents do it, I'm just floored by how much they commit to their
Oh.
child,
Uh-huh.
and it's amazing. But not everyone starts out there. Not
Yeah.
everyone starts at this point where like they feel like they have the bandwidth to do that.
Sure. It's a big time commitment to do the half an hour a week, or is there a lot of other stuff that's involved in that?
So the half an hour a week, and then
That's a
our
lot just to add into your schedule in general. If you have
yes.
a full schedule, if you're working or you have other kids or whatever.
Yeah, like with other kids, you need to find childcare for them, right?
Yeah.
This is
Oh my
about this
gosh.
child.
Oh, that's so
hmm
tricky. Yeah.
But then also the courses, the classes
Mm-hmm.
are 2 hours every
Oh.
week.
Uh-huh.
So it is a big time
It
commitment.
is a big time commitment. Oh my gosh, I'm always so impressed when somebody like takes an opportunity to engage with something like that. Like it is such a big ask to do, and it's a big deal to like step out and trust, okay, I'm going to like honor this commitment. I'm going to like step into this and see what happens. And what do you see come out of that time?
Um, well, we've gotten feedback. Like, I've gotten
Mhm.
feedback where I've had a parent tell me it changed their life.
Aw.
Which is so cool.
That's
And
amazing.
yeah, and it's not to say that, you know, they don't get dysregulated at times, and
Sure.
their child, I'm sure, will get dysregulated at times, right? But like, wow, I had this 10 weeks to
Mhm.
really, really change the relationship that I have with my child. And
Yeah.
now we're on a different page. Like,
Oh.
we are moving forward. We're able to move past,
Yep.
right? Like hiccups that come up
Yep.
because things happen, right?
Yeah.
We're not
Right.
we're not
Right.
immune from being upset and being
Things are still going to happen.
dysregulated.
Dysregulation is going to happen. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, it's going to happen. But now it's like, okay, I have this established relationship where
Mhm.
my child seeks me out for comfort and connection.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and then I have the tools to be
Yep.
able to do that, because we also go over things like limit setting. How do you
Mm.
properly set limits with your child?
Yeah.
And there's a formula that we use for that, and it's just nice to have, like, okay, I have these skills, I practice them. I had a therapist that was like cheering me on the whole time,
Yeah.
and okay, I'm feeling empowered.
Okay, there's a formula to limit setting. What does that even mean?
Yes. So it's called, with play therapy, it's called
Uh-huh.
ACT limit setting.
Okay.
And so the first step is acknowledge the feeling,
Uh-huh.
which
Oh,
is the most
yeah.
important step.
Yes. Yeah.
So you're feeling really frustrated.
Yeah.
Now, I will say that sometimes kids will argue back and they'll be like, I'm not. Oh, that wasn't right.
Uh-huh.
Like, it's okay to say, like, okay, that wasn't right. I didn't get it right that time.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Um,
That is something that I see reflected so much down the road. That ability for like that to be wrong. Something that I get to do with clients is like offer up a guess basically when they've been so disconnected from their emotions and didn't have a parent who's able to reflect their emotions back to them, so they don't know the words for their emotions, and maybe they're already struggling with like interoception or ability to feel their emotions, and getting to like take a guess, and we can go, ooh, is this, are we feeling like a little sad right now, can we No, it's not really sad. That's not what it is. And that's safe. It's not like you are this thing. So I love that there's the opportunity to be like, oh, you're feeling really frustrated. Oh no. Oh my gosh. No, you're not feeling frustrated. Okay, that was a guess. Let's figure out something else.
Yes.
Okay, so acknowledge the feeling.
Yes, acknowledge the feeling. And sometimes you can honestly just stop there. Like if sometimes it's even like a child just feels heard.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, like especially if they're used to
It's
formula,
amazing.
they know what's coming next.
Right.
They know what's coming next.
Okay.
The second is communicate the limit.
Yeah.
So maybe it's you're feeling really frustrated. You cannot throw blocks at me.
Yeah.
Like I am not for hitting. Communicating that limit because right. We're not for hitting.
You can't throw blocks at me.
Yes.
It's not allowed.
And then targeting the choices is key. So maybe it's now you have to give like 2 choices that you're okay with.
Okay.
But maybe it's like you can throw your block somewhere else or you can do this. It's not a rush to get the behavior extinguished either. It's not like I'm going to bribe you with this or
there's going to be a huge punishment if this ever happens again. This is a countdown to when you're in a lot of trouble. This is like we're offering other opportunities for you to express the thing that you're trying to express by throwing blocks at me.
Yeah, and honestly, I use ACT limit setting. It can be so gentle. I use it all the time in the office when kids don't want to leave. Oh, you really want to stay. You've been really excited playing with me.
Yeah.
We have to leave right now. We can choose to, do this or that. Or maybe it's you can put that toy wherever you want. Because I'll have some kids that will try to take toys to the playroom. And we do have the limit of, nope, toys have to stay in the playroom. So you get to decide, you can put that toy anywhere in the room.
Yeah.
So there's always going to be like
I love that. I really like the emphasis not being on extinguishing whatever the behavior is too, because that's always, it's like the power and control thing that exists so much, I think, in a lot of types of therapy is like we're just focusing on getting rid of this thing that is bad. It's like, no, this thing is an expression and it's valid. They're allowed to not want to, leave the toy in your office or not want the playtime to be over. But like we can offer other options, other things to get to do.
Yes, definitely. And I think it's also really important. I tell parents to like pause in between what you're saying. And specifically for neurodivergent individuals, right? We need to give that processing time.
Yes.
Not everyone has, everyone has a different processing time. So it's individual. But in general, kids have a slower processing time, right? And then we have neurodivergent folks who are processing lots of things at once, right? Like
that's it. That's the key thing. It's not that like neurodivergent folks are slow to process, because that can be certainly the perception of it. It's that there are like 8 things happening at once, or 800 things happening at once, and it's like I don't even have a moment. And there's also a delay on it. Literally today, Price and I were in a restaurant talking, and he said something to me, and I looked up the moment he said it, and he was like, what were you, it was a time sensitive thing he was trying to show me. And I was like, I looked up the moment I heard you. When did you tell me? And he's like, seconds and seconds ago, like not now. The moment has come and gone. And it's like, there are other things happening in my brain. And once that popped up, it was like, oh, Price needs you. Yes, immediately. And the moment was past. But I see that a lot in kiddos where like, especially neurodivergent folks need a little time to let this settle. I need to see where it sits with me before I'm able to respond to you. And as I know we'll keep talking about, a lot of the times neurodivergent kids end up having neurodivergent parents.
Yes.
And that parent pausing seems so important as well. You don't have to rush through this. You can take your time. It's a lot to see your kid upset and frustrated.
Yes. So practicing that pause in so many ways is so important, because what we don't want to do is like run through ACT, you're feeling this, you can't do that, this is what you could do instead. And be like, all right, you got to do it right now. Yeah. That's not the goal. Yeah. That's not how this is going to work. We're going to give kids time to process. Now, if you're being hit, you can move out of the way, right? Move out of the hitting zone.
Yeah.
And then trust in your kid. Trust in your kid's ability to process this, listen, follow through on what you're saying, and make a choice for themselves.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, like, practicing the pause again, we're leaving the playroom. I might have a client coming up, right? But I give that kid, instead of rushing to like limit set again and again, I give that kid time to process, and it's not a fight.
Yeah.
And they get to come out happy and regulated. I'm happy and regulated.
Yeah.
And we get to end on a positive note.
Oh my gosh. I can't imagine the process of having like a great play therapy session and then it ending with a fight of the kid not wanting to leave because they're having such a good time and don't want it to be over. And then you're having to recover from like screaming kiddo, bringing in the next kid again and again and again throughout your day. And I love that this is a tool that even in just like your therapy space allows you to like, they're leaving happy and content and you got to take that time with them and you get to enter your next session, because that's the biggest thing, again, I think as a parent of neurodivergent kids, is dealing with your own dysregulation. And obviously your own dysregulation not only brings up, it's tough to be dysregulated, but when you're seeing your kid have these behaviors that you weren't allowed to have as a kid, that's one of the biggest things that I see like parents really triggered by.
Yes.
Is like, I wasn't allowed to do that. And it immediately brings up not safe. It's not safe for you to do that thing.
Yeah. And so sometimes like parents even feel like they're, helping their child. Like they want what's best for their child. Like, oh no, the world is not going to accept you as this.
Yeah.
Right? You're not going to be allowed to do this because that was their experience.
Yeah.
So it is like this way of like trying to keep your child safe. And so I think we can acknowledge that, like, okay, we see where that comes from. And, like, that's okay. There's no shame or blame. But right now, you have the opportunity to, like, do parenting differently.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so I think ACT is such a great tool for setting limits. I love having this really like individualized time for your kid. I think obviously as a part of this program, but even just in general, that dedicated one-on-one time is such a big deal, and it changes the way they see you as the person that they can come to and like receive that sort of that level setting, like you're my safe place. What else do you see as some of the biggest like tools that you get to hand off to parents of neurodivergent kids?
Well, I would love to mention a tool that I am not trained in yet.
Okay.
It's actually called Alt Play.
Alt play?
Alt.
Alt play.
So like AUT.
Okay. Yeah.
And Dr. Grant, he has lots of free resources, but it is like a family play therapy dynamic specifically for autistic children.
Ooh, I love
it's
this.
neurodivergent affirming. And he is just like up and up with, changing when the verbiage changed and like things like that. Like he's like, yes,
he's on top of it and with it. I love that.
So, you look for professionals like that. Cause like there are some that are like, no, this is the way I learned it.
Right. I've always been doing this. It's fine. It's like, okay.
Yes.
We don't have anything to talk about anymore, but I appreciate that. Yeah. It's tough to change.
Another area that I'm really learning, and we spoke about briefly, is polyvagal theory.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really cool tool to help us understand the way our central nervous system is reacting in different circumstances.
That is so important because like autism specifically, how I explain it to clients is that it's a difference in the way that your brain is wired, which is that you have all of this basically like extra wiring compared to a neurotypical person. You have way more wiring in your brain. And so it's way more to process at all times. You're way more likely to get overwhelmed. But at the same time, it's just a chronically dysregulated nervous system. It's a nervous system that really struggles to be able to like settle down or to come out of shutdown. And understanding that about yourself, about your kid, I think is such a like breakthrough bit of education to have. So how have you been learning about this? How is this something that you're teaching kids and their parents, either or? What are you doing?
Yes. So I think it's really helpful to talk parents through dorsal vagal, which is like the shutdown mode.
So this system names these different states for your nervous system.
Yes.
And so one is dorsal vagal, and that's, or dorsal.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's shut down. So maybe it looks like sleepiness, right? Maybe it looks like, for adults, it can look like when you're scrolling constantly on your phone, you're getting lost in that, right? You're shut down. And I think that, we can all kind of think of a time when
Yeah.
we're like, oh, yeah,
It's the like low energy, apathetic to your environment. Everything just feels like it takes more energy. I feel like there can even be like a body heaviness that comes with it. It's just like your body essentially wants to go into hibernation. Like that's the state we're heading toward. It's just like, yeah, heading down into shutdown.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Powering off. Like, we're
Right.
just
Powering
like,
off.
you know what? It's just too much, right? And then we have sympathetic, and that is when you are mobilized. You're ready to go.
Yeah.
And none of these states are bad. I should like start out with that. Like none of them are bad. They're all just things that happen. And so
Yeah.
this is neutral. But sympathetic, right? Maybe it's like that fight, that stress response, that
Yeah.
flight. Oftentimes when you have a kid come in like a dorsal state and they may be going through treatment, something, starting therapy, doing something else, sometimes they'll go from that dorsal state to then that sympathetic state.
So they're not moving through to a regulated state. They're like from shutdown into activation.
Like, ooh, I am turned on and I am like really, really on.
Well, that's why I was shut down in the first place, because when I'm on and it's scary. And so
Yes.
I'm shut down otherwise.
Yeah. And I think we can see that in parents too, right? So sometimes you're like non-responsive, and then
Yeah.
all of a sudden there's that blow up.
Oh, yeah, that's such a good example of that. I think of that, encountering that as a kid with a parent who was like shut down, non responsive, couldn't get their attention. And then when you did get their attention, it was like, what do you want? Like,
Yes.
there wasn't any passing through, like, okay, now we're talking.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then ventral, vagal, is our regulated state. We're feeling connected. We're feeling good. We're feeling comfortable. We're feeling confident. You know, some people use the word like serenity. Actually, Jackie Flynn, she's a play therapist, and she has like a lot of information. I follow like a lot of great people.
I love this.
She wrote a book, and she named ventral vagal serenity, and she named sympathetic bolt.
Okay.
And oh my gosh, I am blanking on the last name.
Dorsal. Uh-huh.
Yeah, I'm blanking on that one. But she has a book that goes along with it. So what that like allows me to do is explain to kids kind of what their central nervous system is doing in those moments.
How do you use that language to talk to like a younger kid? How do you explain to kids about their nervous system and about understanding it?
I use more like that observational. Like
Okay.
I'm tracking, right, and I'm noticing and I'm saying out loud what their body is doing, what their actions like tell me. So I don't think it's like super super important for kids to like young kids to really like grasp like oh imagine like a 5-year-old coming up to you and be like, oh, I'm just in dorsal vagal right now. I'm in dorsal. I don't know. Maybe my future kids will do that.
Maybe. That's amazing. Okay, so are you talking about the states at all, or are you just like noticing and observing like what's happening and kind of saying that out loud so that they're aware of what's going on with their body? Where's kind of that education landing for them?
Yeah. It depends. I mean, if like it's a 3-year-old, I think it's a concept that I don't need them to grasp. I don't think that they have to grasp to move towards growth and towards healing. But if it is an older kid and I'm like, okay, yeah, this is something that might be useful. I just don't see a whole lot of, I guess I don't see the point in like having to follow the script of like, oh, well, they have to learn this, right? Like, I don't know.
It's the structure through which we get to learn and understand that, like, as professionals. But I don't even think, most of the time for my adult clients, I'm not finding it super useful to go through the language. I had a therapist of mine who we talked about in the bad therapy episode. I had a therapist of mine want to, like, quiz me on the state names. And I was like, this is not only not useful, but it's really taking me out of this moment to have to think about this in such an intellectual way. Like, I want
Yes.
to notice what's happening with my body.
Mm-hmm.
What's the purpose of observation? What's going on there? Is it so that they're aware? Is it,
Yeah. Well, I think sometimes it's like, sometimes we don't even notice, right?
mm-hmm,
Or like maybe, not that you're not noticing, but like they're noticing, they're feeling so many things at once. And
that's
I
a
can
good
just kind
point.
of help ground that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, this is what I'm seeing, and kind of bring it to the present moment. And it's also just acknowledging, like, I see you,
Yeah.
right? And actually, like, I'm not scared. It's
Mm-hmm.
okay.
Yeah.
I'm just noticing you're not in trouble.
Yeah, you're not having to now like hide these things. I feel like as things were being pointed out to me, it was in a negative way. So if something was brought to my attention, it was like I have to shut down this behavior forever
Yeah.
instead of like behaviors and the feelings that we're having, like that's neutral. That's okay. You're allowed to be feeling that way and I can just notice and say it out loud.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And feeling safe. Like, that's
Yeah.
just so important.
It's so
Yeah.
important.
The last thing we want to do is like point something out and like have someone want to hide it forever, right?
Right.
And
Oh my gosh. Yeah, so many behaviors I never did openly again that were very regulating to me. They were the things I needed to. And now, especially when we're talking about neurodivergent kids, so many of the behaviors are not what you're seeing in neurotypical children. And it doesn't mean that they're harmful or bad, but like the flapping, as an example of like what's not allowed in polite society. So
mm-hmm.
we have to shut that down. And it's like, what a harmless tool, like
Yeah.
harmless and amazing tool to regulate your nervous system if you can happy flap or frustrated flap or do whatever you need to do.
Yes. And what I do appreciate about polyvagal is that we talk about regulating ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, oh, this is allowed,
Yeah.
right? Oh, I can hum, I can tap, I
Mm.
can
Mm-hmm.
rock back and forth, I can flap my hands, I can do these things. That's
Yeah.
okay.
Yep.
And actually, we want to do those things. We want, how is your body feeling like it needs to move naturally right now?
Mm-hmm.
Um, do that,
Yeah.
right? And then we can get into maybe that ventral state. Maybe we're feeling connected and we're feeling
Yeah.
confident and maybe calmer. But again, the goal isn't to just like immediately get back to ventral. Like, oh my
Uh-huh.
gosh, all these other like dorsal and
Ventral's the
sympathetic are
only state
bad.
in which to live your whole entire life, and you should never escape from that state.
Yeah, like that's not the goal.
Yeah.
I think also Dr. Mona Delahook,
Mm-hmm.
she has a book, Beyond Behaviors and Brain Body Parenting. Well, two books.
Yeah.
And I also have her flip chart. And I think she also does a really great way of like just describing these states. And
Mm-hmm.
she does use colors,
Oh.
green, red, and blue.
Okay.
I think we oftentimes have this like negative association with red and we
Right.
have this like positive association with green. But she does like state like it's not
These
that
are
this is
neutral.
bad,
Yeah.
right? It's just her way, how she like conceptualized it and how she
Okay.
teaches others. So I definitely use her flip chart sometimes. Honestly, even with like teenagers, right? And like on the pictures, it's like a younger kid, but I'm like, what would
Mm-hmm.
this look like for you, right?
Oh.
So maybe
Uh-huh.
you're not having an emotional outburst in like Target, right?
Right.
But maybe
Yeah.
internally, right? You're doing something, or maybe you are, spending a lot of money, for
Yeah.
like adults. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
what's your cue,
Oh.
right? That you're
Yeah.
dysregulated. It might look a little bit different,
Uh-huh.
but that doesn't mean that you're not dysregulated.
Right. Right. Absolutely. It doesn't have to be like a child having a tantrum for that to be dysregulation. And especially when you've been shamed about that and you've learned that being dysregulated is what takes away your connection, which is what's key,
Yeah.
you your dysregulation starts to look extremely different
Hmm.
because you suddenly have to mask that with I'm freaking out inside. I'm doing like a lot of shopping to comfort myself instead of doing something that maybe it's nice to have an observable behavior. It's nice that
Hmm.
Price can see physically when I'm dysregulated and can be like, ooh, what can we do in this moment? But when you've been
Yeah.
taught that that's going to take away your connection from your parent or from other, caregivers, it's going to show up in very different ways. And I think that then just naturally, even if you do have a safe home, that shows up because of societal expectations differently in older kids as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Definitely. It is, um, I think it's a good point to talk about how like there can even be safety in the home, but like there could dysregulation can still exist, right?
Yeah.
Because of like society.
Yes. Yes. Do you ever do anything about recommending? I talk about kind of alternative stimming almost with some of my adult clients. Like, here, let's find some stims that do similar things to the stims that you're using now, but stims that you can use out in public a little bit more easily.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have regulating like behaviors or actions, something like physical? Let's talk about kind of the different states. If somebody's in dorsal, what are the things that how can a parent recognize their kid is in
Mm-hmm.
dorsal, and how can they help their kid move through dorsal, um,
Yeah. Well,
both observe and to help regulate
I'm
them?
definitely not an expert in this, but
Mm-hmm.
um, dorsal, I mean, seeing your kid just be kind of unresponsive, right?
Uh-huh.
Maybe it's the kid that says yes to everything or okay, that's
Ooh,
fine.
that's a good example of that. Yeah.
Yeah, like it's like, oh, okay, they're so obedient, right?
Mm-hmm.
But actually they're totally shut down.
Yes.
They're not online.
Yes.
And so seeing that, and then really like, I mean, I think with a lot of these things, it's gonna be connection,
Mm-hmm.
connecting,
Yeah.
being with your child. So it's not necessarily that you have to like make them do jumping jacks, like to get them
Mm-hmm.
into like a more activated state. But okay, let's spend some time with them. What do they specifically need? So
Yeah.
maybe it is like suggesting a more like mobilized activity, like
Uh-huh.
an activity that may like get them moving.
Yeah.
Um,
Is that typical with moving out of dorsal? I know it's not always 100% of the time the same thing, but is it typical to have some sort of movement be involved in that to help kind of move up that ladder to ventral?
it can be, but I
Okay.
don't want it to like I don't
I
want it
know
to just
that
be
these
like
are
the
all,
solution,
yeah.
right? Like I don't want it to be like, oh, my child shut down. I need to make them like do jumping
Well, once
jacks,
again, it's
right?
not, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So like you need to connect. Like
Okay.
why are they shut down?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that doing an activity together, right,
Mm-hmm.
can be really helpful. I love incorporating movement, but I previously in the school system had been trained
Mm.
on like a certain approach
Yeah.
and um it felt like the solutions were like, oh, have them drink water, have them do this, like have them.
Again, it's like this is bad. What I'm seeing right now in front of me, bad, and we want to change it to something good. And that's not the same thing as like being able to connect with and regulate somebody. Because
Yes.
let's move into this in just a second. I want to talk briefly more about this, but about like co-regulating and what that looks like. And that's how we all move through our states.
Mhm.
Like, that's how we're all doing this, how we're all meant to be doing this. It's not an isolated thing. And I think about specifically an offline, obedient looking kid, somebody who just says, like, yes and fine to everything. That's also a kid who's probably going to be willing to do the, like, weird exercise them you want them to do to seem like they're regulated now.
Yeah.
But you've missed the noticing feels really important, that like
Mhm.
this is okay right where you are, and there can be a reason for this. You're not in trouble for
Mhm.
being in dorsal. Like,
Yeah.
oh, this is a natural human reaction to when things are hard, or when you're feeling down, or when you're disappointed, or whatever.
Yes. Yes. Noticing that, just like reflecting back that feeling,
Mm-hmm.
and then maybe it's asking if the child is old enough. What does your body need right now?
Yeah.
What would feel good to you right now? Maybe it's like getting a hug. Maybe it's let's go play in the backyard together. But
Mm-hmm.
in all of my examples, it's not the child doing something by
You're doing something
themselves.
together.
You're doing something together.
Yeah.
You have to have that connection.
Yeah. That's such a big
Yeah.
deal. That's beautiful.
Okay, so we'll cut it there for today, and we will bring out part 2 next week for
Yeah.
everybody to check out.
Part two specifically features talking about raising neurodivergent teenagers. So I think that that's a really exciting addition to this conversation.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that there's a lot that she brings up that's just useful information on like raising kids. Like
Yeah.
you don't have to necessarily. It's just so focused on like accepting your kids for who they are as opposed to trying to like change who they are to meet your needs, And
Yeah.
I think that that's useful for anybody.
Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
a really good one.
Okay, well, Ash, thanks for your time.
Bryce, thank you for your time. And Courtney, thank you for your time. We
Thank
love you
Courtney.
so much.
You're the best. And we'll see you next time on I Married Your Therapist.
Nice.
Okay, so hanging out with two therapists for like a weekend.
Was that amazing? Was
Yeah,
it like the best thing ever?
It's like therapy, you know? It's like
Just like constant, never-ending therapy.
we're so talking about like our emotions in that moment, you know, where I'm like, yeah, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed right now. And you guys are both like, that's okay. How are you talking
You're
to
allowed
us?
to feel that way.
You're allowed to
Yeah.
feel that way. How are you feeling right now? And I just want to like lay down on the couch and like have a therapy session, like each interaction, you know?
Yeah, why not?